The scream was short. Sharp. Like someone had slammed a door on a secret. It echoed once through the cold stillness of Crescent Hollow, then died into silence. At 2:47 a.m., the streetlights flickered and went dark. The town, already asleep, missed it entirely, except for Mrs. Greta Sanderson, who always woke for her 3 a.m. tea. She later told police she heard something unnatural, like a woman's voice cut short. But in a town like Crescent Hollow, where nothing ever happened, no one paid much attention to her ramblings. By sunrise, Claire Hemsworth was gone. Her bed was still made. Her keys were in the bowl near the door. Her shoes were neatly placed on the mat. The windows were locked from the inside. There was no sign of struggle. No blood. No note. And yet, the house felt wrong, like someone had carefully erased her. Claire wasn't just anyone. She was the town's survivor. The woman everyone had whispered about 6 months ago when her world fell apart. People admired her strength. They said she was stronger than most, and finally doing better. Until she disappeared. Sheriff Daniels rubbed his jaw as he stepped through the doorway of her small cottage. The morning light streamed through half-closed curtains, throwing shadows across the living room floor. It smelled like lavender and lemon soap. Warm. Lived in. Not the home of someone who planned to leave. Any signs of forced entry? He asked. Deputy Marla shook her head. Nothing. He crouched near the fireplace, where something caught his eye. A picture frame, face down on the mantel. Carefully, he lifted it. Claire's wedding photo. She looked radiant in it, eyes full of hope, her arm around Ethan Hemsworth, her husband. Or rather, ex-husband. They had divorced 5 months ago. Messily. Why turn this down? Daniels murmured. Maybe she was letting go? Marla offered. Daniels frowned. Or someone wanted it out of sight. He scanned the mantel. Every other frame stood untouched. Family photos. One with her mother. A snapshot of her as a child on a beach. Only the wedding photo had been moved. It wasn't random. He turned to Marla. Get a team in here. Full sweep. No assumptions. Claire Hemsworth wasn't a mystery to everyone. To those closest to her, she had always been transparent, kind, quiet, but fiercely loyal. She volunteered at the local shelter, baked for church events, and never missed her Tuesday book club. After what happened last year, most thought she deserved peace. But peace wasn't something Claire ever really had. The betrayal had come slowly, like poison in tea, sweet at first, but deadly in the end. She had trusted Ethan with everything. Her love, her life, her secrets. They had been high school sweethearts, married young, and built a life together in the very house she vanished from. But then came the affair. And worse, the lies that followed. Lies that weren't just about love, but money. Her inheritance. Her mother's estate. Quiet manipulations that left Claire with almost nothing when the marriage ended. She had wanted to scream back then. But she didn't. Instead, she started over. A new job at the clinic. New friends. A slow return to herself. And now, she was gone. Down at the sheriff's office, the phone calls had begun. Local news reporters were circling, hungry for a headline. Local woman vanishes without a trace. Dark past returns to haunt survivor. Daniels ignored the noise. He wanted facts. And the first came in the form of a letter, discovered tucked inside Claire's nightstand drawer, unopened, addressed to her. It had no return address. It simply said, "He knows. Don't trust him. You were right all along." Daniels read it twice. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. The handwriting was neat. almost too neat. But the paper was worn, as if someone had read it over and over. The envelope, slightly torn, looked recent, maybe delivered in the last day or two. Claire had told no one about receiving a letter. The he in question was the obvious suspect, Ethan Hemsworth. But he had an alibi. A shaky one, but still an alibi. Where was Ethan last night? Daniels asked Marla later that day. At the Ridgemont Hotel, about an hour out. He said he was attending a real estate conference. Confirmed by 2 others on site. Anyone else see him between 2 and 3 a.m.? No. Daniels exhaled through his teeth. Too clean. Too perfect. And that's when something strange happened. A hiker found it. Around noon the next day, just outside of Hollow Creek, a quiet stretch of woods about 30 minutes from Claire's house. A place she loved. A place she went to think. Her bracelet. A small silver charm with her initials, CH. It lay on a mossy rock near the base of an old elm tree. Not hidden. Not lost. Placed. Daniels stood staring at it for a full minute. She came here, Marla said. Or someone brought it, Daniels replied. Wants us to think she did. Near the bracelet, shoe prints were found, size 9, men's. And beside them, faint scuff marks. As if something heavy had been dragged. That's when the panic truly began. Not just a disappearance. Now, possibly, foul play. Ethan was called in. He arrived looking tired, bags under his eyes, wearing a shirt too crisp for someone who had just woken up to the news. I want to help, he said calmly, hands folded on the table. Daniels studied him. When was the last time you saw Claire? About a week ago. We had coffee. Friendly? Somewhat. She still blamed me for a lot. Rightfully. Daniels nodded. Did she seem scared? Ethan paused. No. But, paranoid, maybe. Like she thought something was coming. Something? Ethan's lips tightened. She said she'd found something. Something important. What did she mean? I don't know. She wouldn't say. Just told me. You'll see soon enough. That's all. Daniels leaned forward. And what do you think she meant? Ethan didn't answer. He just looked away. Back in Claire's house, another search revealed something unexpected. Behind a loose plank in the bedroom closet, a small notebook. Hidden. Inside, pages filled with entries. Observations. Suspicion. She had been watching people. Dates. Names. Times. A note about a man named Ralph Gentry, a local contractor known for shady dealings. Another entry about a hidden bank transaction linked to someone at the town hall. A small sketch of a key. At the bottom of one page, in red ink. They think I don't know. But I see it now. All of it. Daniel sat back in his chair, staring at the last line. This wasn't just a woman recovering from heartbreak. Claire had stumbled onto something. And now, she was missing. 2 days passed. The town grew restless. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she ran away. Some whispered Ethan did it. Others believed she was dead. Then, the phone call came. Untraceable. A voice distorted through static. She's not dead, the caller said. But if you don't stop digging, she will be. Click. Daniel stared at the receiver. His gut twisted. This wasn't just about Claire anymore. It was about whatever she had uncovered. And someone was willing to kill to keep it buried. As the sun set on the third night, Daniel stood again in Claire's house. Everything felt normal. Too normal. Until he opened the linen closet. There, folded between two old towels, was a phone. Not Claire's. A burner. No contacts. No messages. Just one saved voice recording. He played it. Claire's voice, urgent, shaken. If you're hearing this, I was right. It wasn't just Ethan. It goes deeper. Trust no one. Not even. The recording cut off. Daniels stood frozen. Not even, who? Sheriff Daniels played the voice recording again. Claire's voice came through the static, breathless, desperate. If you're hearing this, I was right. It wasn't just Ethan. It goes deeper. Trust no one. Not even. The message cut off. Not even, who? Daniels stared at the burner phone in his hand, the silence in the room thick with unanswered questions. His instincts screamed that the name Claire hadn't said was someone close, someone trusted. Someone hiding in plain sight. He sat in the stillness of Claire's living room, thoughts racing. Someone had been watching her. Someone knew she was digging. And someone had silenced her before she could say more. But she had left breadcrumbs. And now it was up to him to follow them. The next morning, Daniels drove to the Ridgemont Hotel to verify Ethan's alibi again. Something didn't sit right about the real estate conference he claimed to attend. It was a small event, hosted by a regional agency, nothing major, nothing big enough to explain Ethan's nervous energy when questioned. The receptionist, a young woman with tired eyes and chipped nail polish, remembered him. Yeah, Ethan Hemsworth checked in Thursday evening. Room 218. Stayed one night. Did anyone see him between midnight and 4 a.m.? She shrugged. Not that I know of. He was polite, but kept to himself. I didn't see him leave, but I wasn't on shift all night. Daniels made a note. That window, midnight to 4 a.m., still unaccounted for. On the way out, he spotted a security camera above the parking lot. He turned back. Your camera's working that night? The receptionist nodded. I think so. You'd need to talk to the manager, though. Within an hour, Daniels had the footage. And that's when the story shifted. At 2:19 a.m., Ethan's car pulled out of the parking lot. At 4:03 a.m., it returned. So much for his airtight alibi. Daniels didn't confront Ethan, not yet. Instead, he paid a visit to someone mentioned in Claire's hidden notebook, Ralph Gentry. Ralph was a heavy-set man in his late 40s with rough hands and a reputation for cutting corners. He lived in a weathered house on the edge of town, surrounded by old tools, rusted trucks, and a garage that always smelled of oil and secrets. Daniels knocked on the door. Ralph answered in a torn flannel shirt, eyes wary. What's this about? Claire Hemsworth, Daniels said flatly. You knew her? Ralph hesitated. Yeah. She hired me once. For some repairs. A long time ago. Daniels showed him a photo of the notebook entry, RG, September 18th, met at cafe. The vault isn't just paperwork. What did that mean? Ralph's face paled. Look, I don't know what she was on to, he muttered. She asked too many questions. About the town hall, old permits, storage records from years ago. Stuff no one cared about. What vault? He shook his head. That's just what she called it. Said there were things being hidden. Real estate transfers, shell companies. Money moving through Crescent Hollow like it was a front for something. Daniels narrowed his eyes. And you? I did some digging. For her. Nothing illegal. Just, looking at public files. She paid me under the table. Said she didn't want anyone knowing. What did you find? Ralph hesitated again. Then, There's a name that kept popping up on old property deeds. Not Ethan's. Someone else's. Someone who shouldn't own what they do. Who? Ralph's voice dropped. Alan Pierce. Daniels felt his stomach turn. Alan Pierce was the mayor. Back at the station, Daniels locked his office door. Alan Pierce had been mayor of Crescent Hollow for over a decade. A charming man, beloved by the town, always showing up at ribbon cuttings and Sunday fairs. But Claire had always said, people hide behind charm. Especially the dangerous ones. Daniels pulled up old property records. Ralph was right. Dozens of parcels, abandoned lots, small storefronts, empty farmland, all quietly linked to shell companies. And those companies? Traced back to a dummy account connected to Pierce's former law firm. It looked legal. Clean. But something was wrong. And Claire had found it. Meanwhile, Ethan Hemsworth showed up uninvited at the sheriff's office. "I need to talk," he said, eyes bloodshot. "You were right. I left the hotel that night." Daniels kept his expression blank. "Go on." "I drove to Claire's. I didn't go inside. I swear. I don't know why I went. I couldn't sleep. I thought maybe seeing the house would help." "Help what? You still care?" Ethan hesitated. "Yes. No. It's complicated." Daniels folded his arms. "What aren't you telling me?" Ethan exhaled, trembling. "She called me 2 nights before. Said she had evidence. Something big. She was scared." "Scared of what?" Ethan looked up. "She never said. But she told me if anything happened to her. Follow the money." Daniels felt a chill crawl up his spine. That same night, a break came in the form of a fingerprint, lifted from the burner phone's battery case. It didn't belong to Claire. Or Ethan. Or Ralph. It belonged to Jenny Collins, Claire's best friend. Jenny was a schoolteacher. Quiet, kind, a lover of poetry and black coffee. She and Claire had been inseparable for years. They went on weekend hikes together, shared secrets, even went on a failed road trip to Utah just to try something new. When Daniels confronted her, she looked shocked. "I never saw that phone before. I swear. Your print was on it." Jenny stared at the photo, then covered her mouth. "Okay," she whispered. "I gave it to her. But I didn't know it had a recording. Why give her a burner? She said she was being followed. That someone might tap her phone. She didn't trust anyone. Not even you." Daniels blinked. "Me?" She didn't mean it personally. She just thought, the whole town was in on something. Something big. Daniels leaned in. "What else did she say?" Jenny looked down. She found a document. Hidden behind a wall panel in her mother's old study. It had signatures. Bank routing numbers. One name stood out. "Who?" Jenny hesitated. Then whispered, "Your deputy. Marla." Daniels felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Marla? His partner of 7 years. The woman who handled case files, who stayed late to log evidence, who babysat his dog when he traveled. And now her name was tied to Claire's missing file? He didn't want to believe it. But he couldn't ignore it. Late that evening, Daniels returned to the station alone. He opened Marla's locker. Inside, behind a false panel, he found a USB drive. He plugged it into his office computer. What he saw made his blood run cold. Scanned documents. Contracts. Emails between Alan Pierce, Ethan Hemsworth, and Marla. Transactions approved quietly, land sold for pennies, later resold for hundreds of thousands. Dates lined up with Claire's discoveries. She had uncovered a massive real estate scam. And it had Marla's signature all over it. Daniel stared at the screen in stunned silence. This wasn't just about a broken marriage. This was about corruption, fraud, betrayal, and possibly murder. Claire had uncovered everything. And now she was gone. He knew he had to move carefully. If Marla suspected, she'd vanish too, or worse. So he waited. Watched. And then, at 1:13 a.m., a security alert pinged on the office door. Someone was inside. Daniels crept toward the station, hand on his weapon. He slipped in through the back. Marla stood over his desk, trying to erase files from the computer. "Looking for something?" he said. She froze. Turned slowly. "Tom, listen. Save it." She sighed. She wasn't supposed to find out. She just kept pushing. She couldn't leave it alone. Daniel's throat tightened. "What did you do to her?" Marla didn't answer. Just stared at him with something that almost looked like regret. "You really loved this town, didn't you?" Daniels clenched his jaw. "Still do." She nodded. "Then you'll understand why this has to stay buried." Daniels raised his gun. "Where's Claire?" And Marla smiled, cold and knowing. "You're too late." Sheriff Daniels stood frozen, his gun aimed at Marla, the truth burning behind his eyes. His hands didn't shake, but something inside him did. "You're too late," she had whispered. Those 3 words echoed through the still air of the station like a gunshot. "Where is she, Marla?" he demanded again, voice low but sharp. Marla took a step back, hands up, not afraid, but cautious, like a predator testing her prey. "She's not dead, Tom," she said finally. "But she might as well be." Daniels narrowed his eyes. "What the hell does that mean?" Marla didn't answer. Instead, she reached slowly into her jacket pocket. Daniels tensed, ready to fire. "Easy," she said. "Just this." She tossed something on the floor. It slid across the tile and stopped near his boot, a small brass key, worn and engraved with a symbol he didn't recognize. "What's this for?" She smiled. "You're the detective. Figure it out." Daniels lunged, cuffed her in seconds. She didn't resist. As he dragged her to the holding cell, she turned once and said, "She trusted the wrong people. Just like you are now." Then she laughed. Quiet. Bitter. And said nothing more. Daniels didn't sleep that night. He stared at the key on his desk under the lamplight. It had an insignia etched on its bow, a pine tree with a crescent moon above it. He had seen that symbol before. Years ago. On a hiking trail sign deep in the Crescent Pines Reserve, a dense woodland just outside of town. It was rarely used these days, mostly overgrown, but some of the oldest families in Crescent Hollow still remembered its winding paths and forgotten cabins. Claire had loved that place. Daniels grabbed his flashlight, packed a bag, and by morning, he was driving down an unmarked gravel road toward the pines. The forest greeted him like a secret. Birdsong whispered overhead. The scent of damp moss and pine needles thickened the air. As he hiked deeper, the world narrowed. No cell service, no voices, just nature and memory. He followed the overgrown trail until he saw it, an old hunting cabin, nearly swallowed by trees. It matched the symbol. The pine tree. The crescent. The key slid into the lock like it had always belonged. The door creaked open. Dust swirled in the air, and cold, stale air hit him in the face. The room was dim, lit only by shafts of morning light through cracked wood panels. Inside, it looked untouched for years. But someone had been here recently. A lantern sat on the table. A sleeping bag lay folded in the corner. And on the wall was a map, hand-drawn and marked with red ink. Daniel stepped closer. The markings formed a pattern: coordinates, dates, names. At the center, one name was circled over and over. E. Hemsworth. He wasn't the only target. Claire had discovered something more. On the table, beneath a stack of old newspapers, he found a small, leather-bound journal. It was hers. Claire's handwriting, messy and fast, filled its pages. March 2nd, they used me. Ethan knew about the fake deeds. He signed some himself. I found receipts linking his company to Mayor Pierce's shell accounts. March 14th, I met with Jenny. She confirmed the file exists, hidden in the town archives. Someone moved it. She's scared. March 19th, I think Marla suspects. She asked strange questions. I can't trust her. I don't know who I can trust anymore. March 21st, if anything happens to me, I've hidden everything they're afraid of. It's not just money. It's what they buried. Daniels flipped the page, and froze. Inside was a photograph, torn and yellowing with age. It showed a young Claire, standing with Alan Pierce, arm around her shoulders, smiling. But it was the background that shocked him. Behind them stood the Crescent Hollow Asylum. Abandoned. Sealed off 30 years ago after a mysterious fire. Claire had never mentioned she'd been there. He searched the back of the photo. A date, July 16, 1994. And scribbled in faint pencil. It began here. Daniels left the cabin an hour later with Claire's journal in his backpack and a tight knot forming in his chest. If Claire had traced the town's corruption all the way back to the asylum, then this wasn't just about money. This was about history. Secrets buried decades ago. As he returned to his truck, he noticed something odd: fresh tire tracks in the dirt. He wasn't alone. Then he heard it, a twig snapped behind him. He turned quickly, weapon drawn. Nothing. Just the trees. But when he reached his truck, he found a note tucked under the windshield wiper. One line. She's not in the ground. Back in town, Daniels returned to the sheriff's office just past sunset. Marla sat in her cell, calm, unreadable. He held up the journal. Was this what you were trying to erase? Marla looked up slowly. Her eyes flicked to the journal, then back to his face. She really was smart, wasn't she? You lied. You said she was gone. I said you were too late. I never said she was dead. Daniels stepped closer. Where is she? Marla leaned back against the wall. She left a message for you. One you haven't heard yet. Daniel's brow furrowed. What message? She recorded something. Right before she disappeared. But it's encrypted. You'll need her voice to unlock it. Daniels blinked. Voice? Marla smirked. It's biometric. She used a voice-locked recorder. She told me once, I don't even trust my fingerprints anymore. And where is it? That, Marla said, is where the real game begins. Daniels didn't sleep that night either. He kept replaying the words. She's not in the ground. It began here. You'll need her voice to unlock it. Claire had known this would happen. She had planned for it. And then he remembered something. A conversation. Years ago. Claire had laughed about time capsules and secrets. She said, if I ever go missing, check the only place I ever truly felt safe. Where we carved our names. The tree. The tree behind her childhood home, the one with their initials carved in the trunk when they were teenagers. Back before Ethan. Before everything. At dawn, Daniels drove to Claire's family estate. It had been empty for months, the bank seizing it after her disappearance. Overgrown weeds choked the driveway. The front porch sagged. But the tree was still there, an old oak that stood like a sentinel at the back of the property. And there it was, carved into the bark. TD plus CM. Daniels ran his fingers over the faded letters. Then he noticed something new. Just beneath the carving was a screw. He twisted it loose, and out popped a small, weatherproof capsule. Inside, a micro-recorder. He pressed play. And Claire's voice, trembling but determined, spoke. "Tom. If you're hearing this, then I've vanished, or worse. But you need to know, the asylum wasn't just a hospital. It was a vault. That's where they buried everything. Documents, photos, patients they wanted erased. My mother was one of them. She wasn't crazy. She was silenced. The fire wasn't an accident. And the people responsible still walk free. You need to go there. To the lower east wing. Look for the initials ERB. They'll lead you to the truth." The recording ended. Daniels stood there, stunned. Claire's mother? The asylum? Everything led back to that cursed building. That night, under the cover of darkness, Daniels parked at the gates of the Crescent Hollow Asylum. The place had long since been fenced off, declared unsafe, yet it still stood, half-burned, windows shattered, walls scarred by time. He climbed over the fence and walked into the dark. The silence was suffocating. Graffiti covered the walls. Broken furniture lay strewn across the hallways. Nature had started reclaiming it, vines crawling through windows, rats skittering in the shadows. He reached the east wing. And then he saw it. Burned into the brick wall, almost completely faded, were the letters. ERB. Daniels followed the hallway until he found a door half covered in debris. He pushed it open and descended into what looked like a basement storage room. At the far end, hidden behind old patient files and toppled shelves, he saw something metal. A locker. He pried it open. Inside was a large, sealed envelope. And taped to the front, another voice recorder. He pressed play. Claire's voice again. "This is everything. The proof. They framed her. My mother knew about the money laundering, the fake land deals, the hidden files. They locked her up and called her insane. This envelope contains original documents. Deeds. Signatures. Payments. All tied to Alan Pierce, and more. You have what you need, Tom. Finish what I couldn't." As the message ended, Daniels sank to the floor, clutching the envelope. Claire wasn't just chasing the truth. She was avenging her mother. And now, so would he. Tom Daniels stood at the edge of the burnt-out basement in Crescent Hollow Asylum, clutching the envelope like it was the only solid thing left in a collapsing world. Rain started to fall outside. Slow at first, then hard, washing over the crumbling structure like it was being baptized after years of secrets. Inside the envelope were documents, hundreds of pages, deed transfers, financial records, psychiatric files, and a letter from Claire's mother. Her real name, Eleanor Rose Bennett. The initials on the wall. ERB. Daniels sank to the floor, lit only by the flashlight's dying beam, and began reading. His heart raced with every line. It was all true. The land the asylum was built on had once belonged to Eleanor's family, stolen through forged signatures and corrupt officials. When she tried to expose it, she was committed under false psychiatric charges. Declared delusional, isolated, and ultimately silenced. The fire that destroyed part of the hospital was no accident. It was a cover-up. But the most shocking part came at the very bottom of the stack, a bank ledger showing consistent, untraceable payments to a private medical transport service. Starting the month Claire disappeared. Claire hadn't died. She had been taken somewhere. And someone in town had paid to keep her gone. The next morning, Sheriff Daniels walked into his office with purpose. His deputy, Andy Reyes, stood up immediately. "Sir, you look like hell," Andy said. "Everything okay?" Daniels didn't answer. Instead, he placed the stack of documents on the desk between them. "We're reopening the investigation into Claire Matthews." Andy's eyes widened. "You're serious?" Daniels nodded. "Serious enough to take on Mayor Pierce. And everyone protecting him." Andy hesitated. "Do you think it's worth the risk? What if they come for you?" Daniels looked at him, jaw tight. "They already did. They came for Claire. They came for her mother. How many others do you think they buried?" It began like a whisper. Daniels called a press conference in front of the courthouse. Half the town showed up, most expecting a boring update. What they got instead was a storm. Standing in front of flashing cameras and skeptical reporters, Daniels held up Claire's journal. This belonged to investigative journalist Claire Matthews. She didn't run away. She didn't fake her death. She was silenced because she got too close to the truth. The crowd murmured. Some gasped. Mayor Pierce, watching from the sidelines, went pale. Daniels didn't stop. He held up the deeds, the psychiatric files, the names. Land fraud. Corruption. False imprisonment. Murder, possibly. And it leads back decades, starting with this man. He pointed directly at Pierce. Chaos broke out. Reporters shouted questions. Townsfolk yelled. Pierce stormed off without a word. Daniels felt his pulse pounding in his ears, but something inside him shifted. For the first time, the town was listening. But it also painted a target on his back. That night, he drove home cautiously, eyes scanning the rearview mirror. He had the envelope locked in a fireproof safe in his basement. But fear crept in. When he entered his house, he saw the warning. His dog, Charlie, lay at the door, alive, unharmed, but shaking. Inside, drawers were open. Cabinets ransacked. Papers scattered. Someone had broken in. They hadn't stolen anything of value. But on the wall, written in red spray paint, were 3 chilling words. Stop or die. Daniels clenched his fists. They were scared. That meant he was close. Back at the station, Marla sat quietly in her cell, reading a dog-eared book when Daniels stormed in. "You knew they took her," he said. She looked up slowly. "Took who?" "Claire. She's alive." A flicker passed through her eyes. "I didn't say she was dead. You let me think she was." "Why?" Marla set the book down. "Because it was the only way to make you listen." Daniels stepped closer. "Where is she?" Marla sighed. "Last I heard, she was moved from Crescent Hollow Medical to a private facility upstate. The kind of place with no name on the gate and no paper trail." "You're going to tell me where? You want the truth?" Marla said softly. "Then you'll need to dig deeper than any badge will allow." Daniels went back to the files and found something odd: payments made to a private healthcare company called Glenmore Holdings, buried under municipal expenses for historic property maintenance. Glenmore wasn't a real medical provider. It was a front. Daniels tracked the LLC to an address 3 counties away. He didn't wait for backup. The facility was remote, tucked in dense woods, guarded by security and surveillance. He went in under the cover of darkness, through a side window. What he found inside chilled him. There were no doctors. No nurses. Just caretakers in uniform, administering sedatives and monitoring vital signs of patients who didn't talk, patients who were kept asleep. He moved through rooms until he found her. Claire. She was lying on a hospital bed, pale but breathing. Monitors beeped softly beside her. She looked the same. Older, maybe, but she was alive. Daniels dropped to his knees beside her. "Claire. I found you." He touched her hand. Her fingers twitched. Then her eyes fluttered. And for the first time in 2 years, Claire Matthews opened her mouth. And whispered, "They killed her." Daniels got Claire out that night. He carried her out in his arms, avoiding cameras and motion detectors. By dawn, they were back in Crescent Hollow, hidden in an old farmhouse Daniels owned outside town. She needed time. Her body was weak. Her mind, foggy. But each hour, she remembered more. She told Daniels everything. How she'd gone to confront Mayor Pierce with the evidence. How she was abducted outside her home. Drugged. How she woke up in Glenmore, strapped to a bed. How they kept her sedated. "They said, my mother's death was the price of silence," she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. Daniels felt his rage boil over. He had the evidence. Now, he had the witness. But he also knew the walls would close in fast. The next morning, the station phone rang non-stop. News was spreading. Daniels had exposed corruption on live television. Pierce had gone underground. And people in the town, ordinary people, started coming forward. An elderly nurse from the old asylum. A former city clerk. A lawyer who'd been threatened years ago. The truth couldn't be buried anymore. But then the unthinkable happened. As Daniels prepared to issue an arrest warrant for Pierce, an explosion rocked the sheriff's station. The blast shattered windows, blew open walls, and sent a cloud of smoke billowing into the sky. Daniels survived. But the fire destroyed everything, every document, every file, every scrap of proof he'd collected. Gone. Except one thing. Claire. When Daniels returned to the farmhouse, he found the door ajar. Panic surged. "Claire," he called. Silence. Then. "I'm here," she said softly, stepping out of the back room. "But we're running out of time." Daniels stared at her. "They'll try again. I know. But they can't erase what's in your head." Claire met his eyes. "I don't want revenge, Tom. I want justice. Not just for me, for my mother. For everyone they buried." Daniels nodded. "Then we end this." That night, Daniels went live on social media, no press conference, no edits, just raw video. He told the whole story. Showed Claire. Shared her words. Named the names. Within hours, it went viral. Within 24 hours, state authorities arrived in Crescent Hollow. Within 48, Alan Pierce was arrested trying to flee the country. The town shook. People protested. The mayor's mansion was vandalized. His allies vanished. Claire's story became national news. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because in the days that followed, Daniels started receiving anonymous letters. Each one with a different name. Each one tied to the same past. Each one ending with the same phrase. She wasn't the only one. The storm hadn't passed. It had only just begun. For 3 days after the live stream, the town of Crescent Hollow simmered in chaos. Mayor Alan Pierce had been arrested, his mansion raided, his allies exposed. But with every layer of truth that peeled back, more rot was revealed underneath. Sheriff Tom Daniels stood at the edge of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. And Claire, fragile, recovering, but fierce, was right in the middle of it. They had uncovered the truth about her disappearance. About her mother, Eleanor Rose Bennett. About the asylum. About Pierce. But something still didn't make sense. Because just after Claire's video testimony had gone viral, the letters started coming. Each one arrived in a plain white envelope, with no return address. No fingerprints. Just a name. A date. And the same line. She wasn't the only one. The first name was Marjorie Klein. A retired librarian who had vanished in 1997 after speaking at a town hall meeting about lost deeds and irregular property taxes. The second was Helen Tisdale, a single mother whose son died in a state-run group home. She had claimed negligence, then disappeared weeks later. By the time the fifth letter arrived, Daniels was convinced. This wasn't about Claire. This wasn't even about Eleanor. This was about systematic erasure of anyone who got too close to the truth. "We need to talk to Marla again," Claire said one morning, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as she sipped warm broth in the farmhouse's tiny kitchen. Her voice was stronger now. Her eyes, still tired, had lost that vacant glaze. Daniels nodded. "You think she knows more?" Claire gave a tired smile. "She always knows more." Back in the sheriff's office, still functioning out of a temporary trailer after the bombing, Marla sat in cuffs. Same calm, calculating expression. Same half-smirk. Daniels entered with Claire trailing behind him. Marla looked up, eyes flicking over Claire. "Still breathing, I see." Claire didn't blink. "Try to hide your disappointment." Marla gave a soft chuckle. "Oh, Claire. I'm not disappointed. I'm impressed." Daniels stepped in. "We have questions. And this time, you're going to answer." Marla leaned forward. "Only if you're smart enough to ask the right ones." Claire reached into her coat pocket and tossed one of the letters onto the table. "You recognize this?" Marla glanced at it. Then leaned back slowly. "I do." "So it's you?" Daniels asked. Marla shook her head. "No. But I know who it is. Or, what it is." Daniels frowned. "Start talking." Marla's voice turned low. Controlled. Deadly serious. "There was a group. Not official, not documented. Started in the late 80s. High-level town officials, business leaders, even a few out-of-town investors. They called it Project Reverie." Claire's eyes narrowed. "What the hell is that?" Marla tapped the letter. "A network. Of control. Land, people, institutions, all connected. They needed Crescent Hollow to stay asleep. To stay predictable. Manageable. So whenever someone made noise, whistleblowers, activists, even concerned parents, they made them disappear." "How many?" Daniels asked, voice tight. Marla met his gaze. "Too many. And not all of them disappeared the same way." Claire whispered, "So my mother was one of the first to fight back. That's why they locked her up. And that's why they tried to do the same to you." The next day, Claire and Daniels dove into town records, the state archives, even old yearbooks and obituaries. Every name from the letters led somewhere strange. Marjorie Klein had been legally declared dead in a boating accident, despite no body ever being found. Helen Tisdale's house had been auctioned off just 1 month after her disappearance, to a shell company linked to Alan Pierce. And then they found Richard Moore. A name Daniels hadn't seen in years. An old friend. Former deputy. Fired abruptly in 2003 after questioning missing evidence in a land dispute case. Daniels tracked him down in a remote cabin 2 hours away. Richard was gaunt. Bearded. Nervous. "I knew someone would come eventually," he said as Daniels and Claire entered. "Why'd you leave?" Daniels asked. "They told me to look away." "I didn't." Then I got death threats. My brakes were cut. So I vanished before they could make it look like an accident. Claire stepped forward. Do you have any proof? Richard nodded. I kept records. Names. Places. Files I wasn't supposed to see. He opened a false panel in the wall and pulled out a lockbox. Inside were dozens of floppy disks, old Polaroids, handwritten notes. And something else. A photo. Daniel's heart dropped. In the photo stood a group of men and women in suits. Alan Pierce. A younger Marla. And standing between them, Daniel's own predecessor. Sheriff Hank Melrose. Daniel swallowed. I trusted him. Claire's voice cracked. So did my mother. As they combed through the lockbox that night, the pattern became unmistakable. Project Reverie was more than a cover-up. It was an ideology. Keep the town clean. Profitable. Manageable. That meant no scandals. No uprisings. No exposure. They'd turned local institutions, police, media, real estate, even health care, into tools of manipulation. And worst of all, they weren't alone. Some of the funding came from outside the state, silent partners in Chicago and D.C., political donors, shadowy investors. It was bigger than Crescent Hollow. Claire stared into the fireplace that night and whispered, "We'll never win if we keep playing defense." Daniels nodded. So what do we do? She turned. Fierce. Certain. We go public. Again. But this time, we bring them all into the light. With help from Richard Moore, they compiled everything into a digital dossier. Names, documents, photos, recordings. And then Claire wrote an article. Not a blog. Not a video. A story. A full exposé, backed by sources, linked to evidence. It traced the corruption from the early days of Crescent Hollow's founding, through the asylum scandal, into modern real estate fraud and silencing tactics. She called it, The Reverie Illusion, How a Town Buried Its Truth. They sent it to The Guardian, ProPublica, The New York Times, and leaked it across Reddit, TikTok, Twitter, even conspiracy forums. Within hours, it was trending globally. Within days, federal authorities opened an investigation. A whistleblower hotline received over 600 tips, some from other towns with similar stories. Claire had lit the match. And the fire was spreading. But then came the betrayal. One night, Daniels returned to the farmhouse to find the door ajar. Again. He burst inside. No sign of a struggle. But Claire was gone. On the table was a note. Not from her. Just a line. This ends when you stop. Daniel spun around, gun drawn, heart pounding. Too late. Something struck him hard from behind. He woke up tied to a chair in an underground room. Cold. Damp. Silent. A figure stood before him. Mayor Pierce? No. Someone older. Taller. The man spoke. You don't know me, Sheriff. But I've been funding your little town for decades. Daniels blinked, blood trickling from his lip. Why? The man shrugged. Control. Land values. Political power. And because it was easy. You took her again. She never should have come back. Daniels narrowed his eyes. So what now? You kill us both? The man smiled thinly. No. That's too messy. He turned toward the door. We'll just erase you. Again. But as he left, the door burst open. Claire. Disheveled. Eyes blazing. Armed. Behind her, Marla. And Richard? Let him go, Claire said. The man stared, stunned. Claire raised the gun. We're not afraid of the truth anymore. By dawn, Daniels and Claire were safe. The man, James Holloway, a real estate tycoon from Chicago, was arrested. Ties to multiple corrupt townships were uncovered. Project Reverie collapsed. But the cost had been high. Too high. Daniels looked at Claire the next morning. We exposed them. But it's not over. She nodded. It never is. The dawn air was cool, quiet, almost peaceful. Catnip grew wild in the yard of the old farmhouse where Claire and Tom had collapsed the corrupt network that had haunted Crescent Hollow for decades. For Claire, who stared out the window with eyes red and exhausted, that peace felt surreal. But there was no rest yet. They had survived James Holloway's attack. The final battle of Project Reverie had ended, leaving bodies of evidence that authorities couldn't ignore. FBI teams were combing through files, federal prosecutors were assembling indictments. Claire's article, and every piece of evidence, was already making waves across news networks. But amidst the storm, a shadow lingered. A secret still buried. Sheriff Daniels found her that morning, kneeling on the porch steps, looking small against the huge oak by the driveway. The initials TD plus CM carved decades ago now looked weathered, but still held meaning, more now than ever. Any last leads? He asked gently. Claire looked up, offering a sad smile. There's one more place. She stood and led him back into the farmhouse. On a cluttered desk lay a folded map, old, yellowed, with one spot circled in red. Under the asylum, she said. There was a tunnel from the east wing basement. A path to the chapel. Daniels raised his brows. I never knew. Because they never told anyone, she replied. Not even our mothers. Their mothers, Claire's and all the disappeared, had found sanctuary there. Not drugged wards, but a hidden corridor lined with records, journals, patient logs, testimonies, that proved innocence, schemed treachery, and recorded the crimes of power. All erased in the fire, Claire said, voice tight. But there had to be a copy, Daniels said quietly. You told me your mother kept a voice recording in that locker. Maybe there's more. Claire nodded. She spoke about it years ago. She said the chapel floor hid a crypt. A resting place where truth waited, like a time capsule. Daniels packed quickly, gathering flashlights and her journal. They left the farmhouse early, before dawn could tip fully into the daylight that now promised hope, but still carried danger. The asylum grounds were cold, unnoticed. Overgrown shrubs sketched across broken windows. Gates hung open, rusted and jerked. They found a narrow stairwell under debris in the basement storage room, found a fallen grate. Tom, moving large slabs, found a narrow hallway beyond. It had a low vaulted ceiling lined with stone. It smelled like damp earth and old hymn books. Half-burned lanterns were mounted on the wall every 10 paces. Graffiti scratched decades-old warnings, the Raven's Watch. Daniels pointed his flashlight down the tunnel. Lead the way. Claire stepped forward, the tunnel narrowing as they went deeper. 10 minutes later, stained glass light flickered ahead, sunlight filtering through shattered windows. They entered a chamber, a small chapel, hidden underground. A vaulted stone ceiling, pews carved from ashwood, and along the back wall, a marble tomb door sealed where the chapel floor should have been. A small brass inscription read, "Let the voices buried rise." Claire knelt and touched the words. Mom saved everything here. Daniels examined the sealed slab. Help me lift it. They pulled the stone door aside with effort. Underneath lay two things. A rusted iron chest, bound by chains and sealed with an old emblem, the same Pine Crescent symbol. A stack of leather-bound journals, wrapped in plastic, untouched. They unzipped the plastic. The journals belonged to Eleanor Rose Bennett, Claire's mother, and others. Claire gently lifted the iron chest's lid. Inside lay a TARDIS-like bundle of faded photos, medical files, receipts. Audio cassette recordings, still labeled in Eleanor's handwriting. Personal letters addressed to Tom Daniels, old correspondence he'd never seen, recounting Eleanor's struggle, pleas for justice, and naming Pierce, Melrose, and others. Tears filled Claire's eyes. Tom watched her carefully. Mom made sure someone would find it, Claire whispered. Someone who cared. Daniels nodded. They pocketed key items for evidence and began moving the rest of the chest to the surface. Back in the farmhouse, night had fallen again. FBI agents had taken over the cereal box office inside one room. Dozens of boxes, files, and pictures lined foam boards stuck to the wall. Among them were photos of Marjorie Klein, Helen Tisdale, and Meredith Dane, names of women who'd vanished or died under suspicious circumstances. Tom and Claire stood with lead agent Garcia. The chapel's artifacts, they're preserved. Intact. The chest you recovered, it's full of classified patient files, undeleted whistleblower testimony, and ledgers that go back 60 years. Agent Garcia nodded. This is enough to indict dozens. Extend arrest warrants. Force truth. They'll try to bury it, Claire said quietly. Garcia looked at Tom. We'll protect you. And her. This goes well beyond federal jurisdiction, it's national. Claire looked at Tom. But first, she said, we need to honor them. The next morning, they gathered outside the chapel entrance in the asylum grounds. The townspeople felt invited, not curious onlookers, but seekers of truth. Survivors, descendants, journalists, clergy, local historians, over 100 people. Tom stood at a podium built into the cracked stone porch. The chest sat nearby, the chest that held decades of buried voices. Today, he said, we reveal what was buried. For too long, lies covered truth. Lives were erased. Voices, silenced. Claire stepped forward. My mother, and so many others, wanted justice. They believed in you. She swept her arms out. I believed in this town. She opened the chest. Light shone across the papers and photos as the first items were displayed on a table. Their stories matter, Claire said. She matters. He matters. Their voices will rise. That day, the town wept and healed. They listened to Amanda Klein, daughter of Marjorie, read from her mother's last letter. They watched as Helen Tisdale's surviving brother placed a bouquet. They heard Eleanor's voice, through recordings, audio files. They heard her say, truth is the only escape from dark lies. One by one, people came up to the chest and laid stones, flowers, letters upon it. Cameras rolled. Journalists covered it. And for the first time in decades, the real Crescent Hollow showed herself. Parting at dusk, Tom and Claire stood beneath the oak. Are you staying? She asked. Tom smiled gently. Maybe. She reached and touched his sleeve. Promise me you'll guard the light. He nodded. Always. They watched the sun set over the chapel, like a benediction. Epilogue lesson, the legacy of light. In the months that followed, federal indictments were handed down, including Pierce, Melrose, posthumously, through the estate, Holloway, and dozens of collaborators across multiple states. Former patients from the asylum came forward. The carved chest is now an exhibit at a historical museum called the Hall of Endurance, honoring whistleblowers, survivors, and those who dared to speak. Claire wrote a book. Voices from Below, My Mother's Truths. It topped charts globally. Tom was offered a consulting role with federal justice commissions. The town rebuilt, shuttered records rooms, funded memorials, and established a scholarship in Eleanor's name. And every year, on that oak tree's anniversary, people leave tokens. The final lesson: truth is stronger than silence. Justice is communal, not just personal. Darkness can be uprooted, one voice at a time. Claire's survival wasn't an act of revenge. It was hope. Tom's fight wasn't just for Claire. It was for every silenced voice. What was buried has risen. The darkness trembled, and lost.